r/AskReddit by Reddit. Doctor/therapist of Reddit. Do you have any no, that's not normal stories? If so, what abnormal habit/oddity did the patient have thinking it was normal? 58-year-old man who came in for chronic issue follow-up. He brought his wife with him this time around. At the end of the visit, she says, "Hey, tell the doc about that thing you can do." He turns to me proudly and tells me that he can whistle from his penis. If he really pushed, he could blow gas from it. His wife insisted it wasn't normal, but he was certain most guys could. Turns out, he had a connection between his bowel and his bladder. Mom brings her kid in because the babysitter was concerned about these spells the child would have. Apparently, the child would have episodes where he would just blankly stare at them and not acknowledge whatever it is they were telling him or whatever he was doing. The parents just thought he was being an butthole and not listening to them, or being absent-minded. Kid turned out to be having absent seizures. A younger gal who had come in for generalized abdominal pain that she experienced on and off for years, but just always wrote off to either menstrual cramps or bad food or life. We had asked her if her bowel movements were regular, and she said yes. At some point, someone was sharp enough to ask her how often she had bowel movements, to which she said about once every 2 to 3 weeks. She had been suffering from pretty severe constipation, but just thought it was normal to have bowel movements once to twice a month. I'm sure I have more, but I think I wrote enough for now. Ninja Reddit. Oh yeah, I have a lot of stories involving skin lesions. Please people, no doctor will ever fault you for wanting to just get something looked at. There are a few easy ways to tell if you're looking at something potentially evil. Gotta amend the above edit due to people's bad experiences. No decent doctor should blow you off if you're concerned about a skin lesion. They should at least take the time to discuss why it is they are not worried about a lesion if it's not concerning. I was a patient, but when I went in for a routine physical, the doctor poked my extended belly and asked how long it had been like that. I laughed and said, "What? My beer belly? Oh, since I was 21 probably." Turned out that, no, the beer belly was a cyst that had grown really large, and that was why my friends kept saying I looked pregnant. I thought I just had really bad friends. Had to have emergency surgery, and for a week or so they did not know if it was a cyst or ovarian cancer. It was a pretty big scare. Believe it or not, this also happened to me. I found it because I became pregnant and they saw it in the ultrasound. Also had to have an emergency surgery, and I lost 32 pounds that day. I always just thought I gained weight weird or something. I feel like my story belongs here, even though I'm the patient, since the exact scenario happened to me. A few years back my mental health totally took a skydive. As a result I dropped out of school and had to start a recovery program. The first thing I had to do was talk to a psychologist. During these conversations with the psychologist, she'd focus on different parts of my life. So one day she'd ask about relationships and the next childhood memories and so on. After a few conversations she focused on my social life. I then told her that it's pretty much non-existent, and it always has been. She then stated that I must have suffered from loneliness a lot then. I just told her that I've never actually felt lonely at any point in my life. After all, it's pretty hard to feel lonely with the two voices in your head always keeping conversation. But surely she knew that, right? Well, as it turns out, no. Apparently everybody else only have their own voice in their head. My entire life has been a lie. Turns out I'm schizophrenic. Who TF knew A? Was on urology rotation in medical school when a 20-something-year-old male presented with a complaint that one of his nuts was too small and he wanted them to be equal because it was embarrassing. One testicle was normal, the too small one, while the other was the size of a grapefruit. Unfortunately the cancer had metastasized. Not sure how he did long term as I rotated off the service after he had surgery. Not a doctor, but when I was maybe 14 or 13 I remember describing to my primary how during my periods I would pass out from the pain, couldn't move or I would get sick, and told her a story about how I went on a trip to Italy and sometime in the middle of the flight became wildly sick to the point of terrifying the poor flight attendants. I'm so sorry flight attendants. Bye. Filling 4 puke bags. crawling to the back of the plane clutching my stomach, finding the doors locked attempting to use the first class bathrooms so I could finish being sick. When denied entry, just lay down in the aisle waiting for sweet death to take me. It did not. Death has terrible customer service and then passed out when we exited the plane. But periods are supposed to be painful, right? The doctor was like, honey, you're supposed to experience some discomfort not being capacitated anyway. She put me on birth control and I've never been happier. Had a patient come into Tridge and write on the sheet back quote, my doctor sent me over. Why? Because she told them last week that she was having to hold her right eye shut to watch TV because it would stare off the other side. She got her MRI with a 4cm brain mass and then waited 4 days at home after her doctor called her before coming to the ED because she didn't think it was an emergency. Upon eliciting a history, she lost most of vision in her right eye about 3 months prior and only mentioned to her OB when she lost control of motor function of her right eye. When I asked why she didn't mention it earlier, she said back quote, well, I know it's normal to just sometimes lose your vision in pregnancy. Turns out, she had an estrogen sensitive brain tumor that likely grew every time she was pregnant and compressed part of her optic nerve and then regressed after she delivered. But no ma'am, it is not normal to go half blind when you're pregnant. That's not in what to expect when you're expecting. Or my lady who came into Tridge with an estimated due date of like 2 months ago, so approximately 48 weeks pregnant, who said she had contractions, no prenatal care, and had never seen contractions. I go in to see her and I asked, tell me about your contractions, and she said, back quote, well, I'm not really sure, but I can't move my legs, so I assume that's labor. I'm not in pain though. Turns out, not pregnant. BHCG, pregnancy hormone, secreting ovarian tumor that made her look pregnant, and she presented with metastatic disease to the spine that paralyzed her from the waist down. Both of these stories have happy endings. BTW. The brain mass lady got delivered and had her ejection the next day and is doing awesome, and the other finished chemo and is a year out with no residual disease and walking with a walker. I was a patient. My parents rushed me to A&E because I'd taken something like 18 paracetamol tablets in less than 24 hours. I'd read stories online about people who'd killed themselves that way, either intentionally or not. I wasn't suicidal or anything. My stomach just hurt really bad that day and I kept falling asleep, so it was hard to keep track of time. When I say bad, I mean absolute agony. I couldn't move. I was vomiting everything up. Paracetamol barely puts a dent in it sort of pain. I figured this was normal pain for getting stomach cramps, that is, from bad food. I got them a lot, to some extent every day, but the severity varied wildly. I figured I was just a complete wimp about normal levels of pain. I'd gone to doctors previously, but every time I'd been told that this was heartburn. A few times it was apparently because I had a test later in the week. Anyway, they take some bloods and it turns out that I had pancreatitis and have had this same condition pretty much every time the pain got so severe I had trouble staying awake. The doctors at the pediatric A&E just didn't want to take my bloods for whatever reason. I got tonsillitis a few years back. I suffered through it for about a week, but my wife convinced me to go to the doctors for antibiotics. Got there and the doctor found it weird that I had to look up to talk. I had to because that was the only way to create enough room in my throat to talk. She looks at my tonsils and says, yeah, we're going to have to keep you in hospital. If your tonsils swell anymore, you're going to stop breathing. I apparently have weirdly large tonsils and the swelling from tonsillitis was almost enough to close my thought. Not an oddity or habit, but I was a patient having 48-hour ambulatory EEG done over the weekend. Had it put on a Friday, go back Monday. Hour or so after it went on, I started noticing it hurting where all the leads are. I'm thinking no one told me this would be so uncomfortable. I couldn't sleep all weekend. My head was burning. I couldn't get in touch with the drive. I called the on-call doctor who said that was no normal. If it was too intense, go to the ER and get it off, or come in as soon as the clinic opens Monday. I waited, paced all weekend, and kept myself occupied. Monday morning they took it off. The leads burned into my skin all over my forehead and scalp. I'm apparently allergic to that metal on the leads and never knew and was having an allergic reaction. The burns were so bad and deep I had to see a plastic surgeon. Thank you for watching Reddit. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more r/AskReddit videos. Share your stories in the comment section below.